All right, letters 25 and 26. So 25, once again, responding to something that Wormwood has written that we are not privy to, but it starts off with kind of the affirmation of one of Lewis's favorite theses. The real trouble about the set your patient is living in is that it is merely Christian. So that becomes a significant phrase, if only for the fact that it alludes to a lot on the outside that points to several things that will be mentioned directly in this letter. One of Lewis's most famous works is entitled Mere Christianity. And in that book, which was originally a series of lectures that were broadcast over the radio, the BBC asked him, this was during World War II, basically to offer encouraging talks. And so these were based off of things he'd been saying for years, but he codified them and he presented them over the radio. They were eventually written and collected in that particular work. And they are connected to some of the themes that we will see kind of within this particular letter. That concept of mere Christianity is very significant for Lewis. We might extrapolate it to give it different terms that mean roughly what he intends, like simple Christianity, basic Christianity, universal Christianity. Those were all the sorts of terms that he would be maybe trying to convey in one element or another by saying mere. When he says mere in that sense, it doesn't mean something that's slight or small or insignificant. It means the bare bones basics in a sense. Whether or not he's actually presenting only the bare bones basics or he has kind of added stuff that seemed basic to him, but maybe not somebody else, is a different issue. But this is kind of what he's talking about. And this is very dangerous for the demons for a couple of reasons. When you're talking about the basics or the fundamentals, you are majoring in the majors rather than majoring in the minors, if you've ever come across a similar phrase. You are concentrating on the important issues and not the secondary ones. Likewise, you are also, if you're talking about mere Christianity, he's talking about Christianity without further additions, without taking judgment on the good or bad or appropriateness or inappropriateness of the additions. By concentrating on a mere Christianity, he is suggesting that there is sort of a kernel of truth that we can concentrate on without, by necessity, adding other things to it. That's, I will say in practice, that's real tricky to do. And there's some things that, even in reading Mere Christianity, you could, I think, rightly say, is that mere or not what you're saying? And what about such and such that you didn't say? And it's a fair argument that can be had. But what's so significant about it within the scope of this particular letter, I think, is his alarm as a demon that this guy's faith and practice are basic and simple. Basic and simple is dangerous to the demons because of how good, profound, and lasting the basics are. The basics are the basics for a reason. The fundamentals are fundamental for a reason. If you talk to a high-level practitioner of an art or a sport or any kind of particular endeavor, they will extol the virtues of the basics, how much time they, even as a high-level practitioner, devote to the fundamentals, and they will talk about how the simplest things are the best ones. So I have the tendency to draw in illustrations about, sports or, martial arts or coaching or whatever. But as I'm sitting across staring at Janet, I'm going to say that, like when she's doing a cooking class, sometimes it's these very elegant, very complicated preparations, and sometimes it is as simple as possible.
Yeah.
But it turns out to be so incredibly good. 3 super fresh, good ingredients makes this beautiful pasta. I remember it very well that she demonstrated to the youth group. It's just, I mean, and you would think like, oh, it needs a little of this, or what about that? And if you get the basics just right, it's fantastic. Am I right? So, if you consider that in whatever endeavor that you might have a familiarity with, sometimes it's not about all of the complicated little details. It's about doing the small number of necessary things really, really well. You do that right, then all the other stuff is either unnecessary or just optional. There's nothing wrong with these other more detailed things, but they become extra. So having this faith, which is bad enough for the demons as it is, but to still be kind of distilled down to a core of basics, is all the more frightening for them. Because the basics never go away. The fundamentals never change. That is very difficult to pry away from, to corrupt, to twist, because they are so simple. It's really the complicated things that are easier to mess up, isn't it? When you've got a dish that you're making that has 17 steps, it's way easier to do one wrong thing and spoil the whole deal. But if it's like 3, same thing with a math problem. If the math problem has 17 steps, one small arithmetic error messes up the whole thing. But if it has 3 steps, it's just, you can catch your own errors a lot more easily. Our cars have become so complicated that we can't work on them anymore. Everything is so computerized that anything that goes wrong has to be taken to the shop, because it's not a matter of a mechanical part. There's programming that has to be adjusted somehow. And even if the mechanical part is broken, you can't just put in a new one. Then you have to like update everything and change everything, whatever it is. So complexities are not bad, but each layer is what they might refer to as a point of failure. Something can go wrong. And the more complexity, the more opportunities for the demons to even making a small adjustment. It could potentially be the one arithmetic error that messes up the whole long equation. So here's this push. You got to get him out of mere Christianity. You need to get him into Christianity plus, because Christianity plus gives us opportunities to poke at the pluses. And the more pluses, the better.
Yeah.
But really anything that is a plus, it gives us the opportunity to try to meld those two in the guy's brain. And he'll start thinking whatever plus he added is now also essential and is just mere Christianity. There's a lot of stuff that we totally take for granted. And is it absolutely positively necessary? I'm sure that it's not. Over the course of church history and ecclesiology, that was for Debbie. There have been efforts within the various splits, schisms, divisions in the church to say, well, what can we agree upon? What if we could come up with a list of basics that we're all cool with? And wouldn't that go a long way to sort of restoring a broader sense of Christian unity. That's just been really hard to do. We as fallible humans just have a real hard time with being able to pick out the tiny bits and pieces that we put in because they make sense to us, or it's what we know versus what must be there.
So like the Council of Nicaea.
Right, the Council of Nicaea, not only as the whole, all the leaders of the church coming together and trying to have a singular spirit-led summary. As recently as the late 19th century, there was a big movement, worldwide movement, for Christian unity within the denominations, the Chicago Lambeth Quadrilateral, which said, we can come together if we can just, if we can find some base suppositions, then we can find a way to be more unified as the worldwide church. Even with our distinctions, we can preserve the distinctions, but provided we can actually agree on the basics, what the basics. And so various things are suggested, and it basically takes the one dissenter to say, not that. I'm with you on everything except for that point. And then now that's no longer a fully unified point. Whether their point is correct or not, this is just sort of a reality of, I think, fallible humans and our finite natures, that there's always going to be some point of disagreement, no matter how hard we try. That's not to say trying is the bad idea. It's not, none of that stuff. It's just, this is just more of a practical reality than it is a philosophical.
So when we're talking, are we trying to like include everybody? I mean, is that the goal?
So
there is some exclusion.
over the course of church history, there have been a lot and perhaps innumerable instances of looking for the sort of visible unity that Scripture teaches is an essential quality of the wider worldwide body of Christ. And in those attempts to foster a visible unity, and it's happened again, thousands of times, the goal is, how can we, if you call yourself a Christian of any sort or stripe, what are the basics that we agree upon? And even that is typically fraught with difficulty. Before we get too far afield from where this is actually going, I posit that as just a reality of our life. The issue becomes with the demons and with this particular guy, a lot as they have been throughout the entire book. Find something small and make it big in his mind, so the big things in his mind become smaller. And add something to his faith that he will then sort of blend it all together in his mind as being an essential component. Because once that happens, we're watering down what's true, we have an entrance to what is optional, we can attack it in various ways, and so on and so forth. One of the ways, and this is really more of a function of modernity and beyond. And by that, I mean, that is there's not a fully agreed upon timeline for what constitutes the modern era, but that is an era of human civilization that lasts a certain period of time, whether we're currently in it or we're in a different era. It doesn't mean now. Modern actually means something about the way that we relate in culture and industrialization and the scientific method and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of has meaning. But the idea is he's going to press with what he says, Screwtape is one of the inventions of hell. And that is this urge for newness for the sake of it being new. The horror of the, quote, same old thing. Now, some of us are creatures of habit. Anybody? Creature of habit? I am. I have, I think, my fair share of whimsy in me, but I like things solid and stable, mainly because I sort of feel like my life is always kind of getting stuff added to it. So I would rather not think about certain things or deal with them. I want them settled because I feel like I always have to be prepared for multiple curveballs. So how about some things I don't have to worry about every day? Like, what are you going to have for breakfast kind of stuff? Like, if that's just the same old, what is it? Was it Einstein who had like 17 pairs of the exact same outfit? It was somebody famous for being very smart. So it was like, why do you have all, so I don't have to spend any brain cells on getting dressed.
Uniform.
So there's some comfort to the stability, right? But there's also something pleasurable about the new. And like pretty much everything that's been brought up, is newness wrong? No. Is same old wrong? Nope. Is our desire for predictability wrong? Is our desire for novelty wrong? All of this is going to be about its intensity, its perspective, and its proportion.
Yeah.
These are all, everything is a gift from the Father of lights, right? It's about what we do with it, how we treat it, what we make of it. And the demons are always going to be taking something that is ostensibly good and trying to twist it, mess it up, dirty it up, spoil it, make us use it the wrong way, whatever it is. So what could be bad about same old, same old?
It's boring. Getting complacent.
Boring, rut, complacent. It could be wrong. You could be stuck in like
the new can be.
yeah, you could be stuck in actual wrong habits.
Right.
It's
And the new as well.
that's one of my boring is one of my buttons. Like it drives me crazy when kids, not just my kids, like any kids, oh, I'm bored. Like that's a moral failing. But don't tell me you're bored because that's your fault. Because like if you just need something to do, I'll give you something to do. To me, boring is because boring is a state of mind. You could have a different person in the exact same circumstances who is perfectly content. So it's not about your circumstances, it's about your perception. And that seems controllable. But you know, there is something to be said for a rut being unhelpful, for the same old to be, if not necessarily wrong, like you've chosen a bad habit. You know, this is, you are a, you know, you're doing something every day that's actually negative and bad for you, but you're stuck in that rut for whatever reason. This could be more along the lines of maybe you just don't pay attention to opportunities for good because you've sort of cut that off. You know, if you are in a particular rut where you just have turned your brain off to that circumstance, maybe there's something the Lord offers to you that you're not even, you know, you're not paying attention to because you just want to keep on cycling through what you're already comfortable with. So that, you know, there could be things, you know, morally wrong habits that we haven't broken, or just the, you know, the same old, maybe not allowing us to be open to the potential of good, a variety of things. What about novelty or newness and change that could be bad?
Yeah. Could be taking you in the wrong direction.
Taking the wrong direction. This will be one of Lewis's common witticisms or observations. Progress is only progress when you're actually going in the correct direction. You know, there's you know, he's writing in the 40s. And there was an urge even then for progress, more, better, the new, there's something new over the horizon that's even better than now, just because it's over the horizon. So we're continually progressing towards something. And so he would give a point then, which I think is a valid point now, which is progress is only progress if you are going in the correct direction. Just because you've changed something, or just because you continue to move forward to the edge of a cliff isn't a good idea. Forward towards this other beneficial goal is a good idea. So it's like, just because you're walking doesn't mean you're walking in a good direction, let alone the right direction.
Why are you walking like that? Because you've always walked like that.
But, and if everybody's going that direction.
Yeah.
Which is so common in today's world, hey, the other church is doing it, we should do it too.
And that is different times in different eras, that may wax and wane, but I think that is also just common to our humanity. Just a sense of a desire for belonging, a desire for community.
Or it could be these guys messing with us.
Sure.
The spiritual world is out there saying,
Right.
"Hey, let's make this a major."
But having something that again appeals to a desire within us that is either good or neutral, but then corrupting it to a worse purpose. And this is just one of those many, many, many ways that the demons will try to do that. Now that we can get your patient thinking about worrying about ruts, worrying about being keep the stuff that's stable boring. Predictable means stodgy, means old-fashioned. And old-fashioned these days is a critique, it's an epithet. We like some things old-fashioned, old-fashioned pancakes or something like that. But by and large, that is used as a pejorative.
Yeah.
Because it means it's out of date. And Lewis will bring this up in a variety of contexts. But again, there's an underlying assumption that because something is new, it's better, and that has to be demonstrated. That's begging the question. Yeah, but it's new. Well, but is it better? Well, it's not old. Yeah, but was the old wrong?
It's like the pharmaceutical advertisements on TV. They tell you, "Oh, and I feel so great," and then it says, and all of a sudden,
Right. May result in explosive diarrhea and death.
Yeah.
So that as a part of modernity, and again, I'm talking about a time frame and a perspective of wider human civilization, a lot of it associated with the concept of industrialization. This sense of the ubiquitousness, the presence, the constant presence of progress, that we're always getting better. So new now is new and improved. What product has not been sold as being new and improved? And by describing itself as improved, doesn't it by definition, even if it's only implied, suggest that whatever came before is lesser, substandard? It's not enough. It's worse. It's somehow worse. It's not different. It's not just older. It's worse because this is new and improved.
Therefore better.
Therefore better. It almost goes without saying, but philosophically, that is the fallacy called begging the question, where you simply make a statement without demonstrating it. You don't prove it. You make a statement that needs to be proved, but you just say it as though like, well, duh. And this is super dangerous for our souls. Why? Why would the assumption that new and improved is why would that be dangerous for our souls?
Can I address something we talked a while back about, the clothing and how we went from new and improved became, I can come in shorts and flip flops. But some of that, maybe this is involved here, but thinking. Some people, we would not go to the White House. But we'll go to church. And again, I'm not pointing the finger, but some of it is like our preparation for, let's say, Sunday. That we come to worship God. And again, I'm not saying anything wrong, but some of it is kind of this the attitude that came out of the 70s, where the people could now come off the beach and into their churches, and yes, we get more people coming that way. So it's new and improved because we get more people coming that way. But there is something to be said about are they some? You're really thinking, I'm here to worship God. Is there a heart preparation? I don't know what that. I'm trying to tie it back.
Yeah,
It's
this
not
is,
like laundry.
the concept of novelty being a good worth pursuing in and of itself takes the utility of novelty or change. There could be a positive change in a dress code that does attract more people, whatever. But then again, it puts it out of proportion. The cart goes before the horse. The good thing about it is not its effect. The good thing about it is the fact that it's new. And when that's the case, then you need something else to do, because as soon as something new is established, it's now old. So now you need something new again. There are a lot of reasons. I know far too many of them, and I'm willing to discuss far too many of them. You will all be bored to tears within moments of why the Marvel movies went from being worldwide blockbusters and cultural phenomenons that everyone, whether they went to the movies or not, understood something about, to now struggling at the theaters to make back their enormous budgets. One small part of it is this concept of ever increasing stakes. When you have a series of stories which builds to a climax and conclusion, when that conclusion is reached and the story resolves, what do you do next? Well, the easy solution is, well, we're going to up the ante. And so, well, he beat a bad guy. Well, next time, now he's going to have to beat two bad. We've already seen him beat one. We can't backtrack. So now he needs to beat two. Well, next time he needs to beat 10. And next time it's got to be a universe-ending consequence. All these movies for 10 years built to this one, if they don't win, half the universe is destroyed kind of moment, and we got to fix it all. And then where do you go after that? And these movies have literally not known where to go. And it's made a difference in the way that people have responded to these stories. If you are always upping the ante because you need more excitement, you need more intensity.
You also want more inclusiveness, where they bring in oddball characters.
You lose the ability after a while to go any higher. Probably the funniest scene from the movie, the mockumentary This Is Spinal Tap, about the fake rock and roll band, is when the bassist proudly points to his amp and he says, well, my amp goes to 11. All the other amps, they only go to 10. Mine goes to 11. And so this idea of, well, just because it's more makes it better, and if we can somehow make it go more than that, but the law of diminishing marginal returns, if nothing else, says we're going to get less and less juice the more we squeeze. And eventually you just kind of run out. So if that's your whole plan, that we've got to go bigger, eventually you lose the capacity to do that. If you're about chasing what's new, if like we're cutting edge, well, the cutting edge is always moving. You never settle on anything. You always have to change. Whether or not what you're changing from was bad or wrong or unhelpful or whatever, you have to. This is where I think the danger comes to our souls, because it's not about true and false. It's not even about helpful and unhelpful. It just becomes, we have to keep moving and changing and looking. Well, why? Well, because that's a dangerous state to be in. He even mentions early on, like, this is the home of every heresy. This urge to get away from the same old, same old.
Source of heresy.
You know, this is,
Tweak it.
yeah, I can make it better. It's good, but I can make it better. And suddenly our souls are fundamentally unsettled because we are not talking about approaching the throne of grace, and every step brings us closer to the presence of God. It turns into whatever it is I'm doing has to be, the technique has to be a little better. The ideas around it have to be new and improved, have to keep changing to the cutting edge.
You're kind of getting away from the mere basics that you likely just talking about.
Well, sure, because
Just adding these flowers on the mere basics.
there are, you know, and this is where the temptation can be, well, let's just, no change, no new. And that's not it at all. That there's a lot of things, even in modernity, we should be enormously grateful for change and progress and new. It can be frustrating to get all of these constant pharmaceutical, you know, this is the newest thing or whatever, but, you know, which of us want the medical care from 200 years ago? Nobody. Nobody wants that. We fully and completely take it for granted that we can alleviate our pain. We have surgical procedures that can remove foreign bodies. We can, you know, all these sort of things that we just completely take for granted, that have some of which have just been changed relatively recently, but certainly within the course of our own lifetimes. So Screwtape is, he acknowledges with some, you know, kind of disdain that God, his enemy, the hedonist, the great hedonist, the pleasure monger, he's given us new and he's given us novel, and he wants us to delight in it. There are new mercies and new blessings every morning. There is an incalculable array simply within nature itself of sights, sounds, and smells that we can't possibly cover within our own lifetimes. There was a beautiful moment that happened in all the places in this is maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the show Man versus Nature, Bear Grylls, who's an adventurist and a survivalist and former British Special Forces and stuff. And he goes on these little adventures and tests his survival skills. Well, he's out way deep in the jungle or whatever, and there's this big tree, and it's got this incredibly large, beautifully colored blossom. And Bear Grylls, without overtly stating the fact that he is a deeply faithful Roman Catholic, simply says offhandedly, the goodness of God, which would make something so beautiful, even though no human eye would ever see it. I just happen to. This thought of the wonders of creation that we could continue to delight and explore, and we still wouldn't see it all.
Stars.
A bunch of these pictures just got released like about a week ago, but they were doing these massively detailed scans of the wreck of the Titanic. Look that up if you get a chance. It is incredible what you can see right now.
Sorry, you said stands?
Scans. They took like 10 years, and they were doing all of these camera, sonar, Doppler, radar, detailed scans. And they are able to now present like almost you were there. No. I mean, just like looking at the wreck exactly right now. This is what it really looks like. If you could actually be down there with sufficient light to see it, you would see this. And it's just amazing. And that is allowing them they can now, examine and extrapolate things that actually happened because they can see the nature of the parts that broke and what orientation they're in and how far away they went and all this kind of stuff in ways that they had to guess before. And now they can, they can measure this stuff now. It's amazing. So new can be wonderfully good and a very gracious gift.
And yet that was old, because it's been there for 100 years.
Sure, there's that nice blending of new and old. But get our minds and our hearts off of receiving what the Lord gives us to demanding what we assume we ought to have. And this will be that's the danger to our souls. The fine line between accepting new and improved and demanding new and improved it's that line is very small, it's very fuzzy, and it's very easy to step right over.
Never thought of that. Never thought of that.
Which part?
What you're saying,
Yeah.
never thought of that.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things,
Well, this is nice and I like it, but what have you got?
what's next?
Yeah.
Yeah. How unsettled we become in our perspectives of the world when we can't enjoy what we're given for what it is, but we anticipate whatever's next instead.
Then you're not living in the present.
That was good. Good with the choice there.
Right. Good lunch, what's for dinner? Yeah. So once that happens, and by not living in the present, you actually begin to lose the pleasures that were intended within that newness. Because you can't be satisfied with it because you're always being pulled to something else. Even when you are given something new and something good, it's like you only half-heartedly accept it because there's more coming. You lose some of the intended joy from what you've experienced because you're never settled enough to embrace it fully. We got to keep moving. We got to keep moving. We got to keep moving. Anybody ever gone on a vacation where you come back exhausted? Anybody ever go on one of those vacations you come back exhausted because you have to push?
Try to do so much.
Yeah. Right.
Cram it all in
Cram it all-
14 days.
That's right, because I might, it was hard to get here, or it was expensive, or we might not come back again, or we got to make the most of it. And so some of the good that ought to have happened, we spoil ourselves because we're rushing to something else, something different, something new. This is, again, he's speaking about God. He wants men, so far as I can see, to ask very simple questions. Is it righteous? Is it prudent? Is it possible? Now, if we can keep men asking, is it in accordance with the general movement of our time? Is it progressive or reactionary? Is this the way the history is going? If there's a phrase that we ought to just immediately tune out and shake our heads. It needs to be something like, history will view this as, and I don't care who you are, I don't care what your perspective is, but as soon as you say that, you're full of it. Because you don't know what history is going to say, and neither do I. We can guess, but what we really intend that is the outcome that I think is going to happen will contain this particular perspective. As opposed to, history will judge this in this such and such a way. Like, yeah, maybe.
That's Professor talk.
And maybe not. Well, there's been a lot of things that I thought were sure things, and they did not come to pass. And every now and again, there's something that I think is 1,000,000 to 1 shot, or just ain't going to happen. And wouldn't you know, there it is.
Think about when we changed to 2000, from 1000.
Yeah.
Everybody had all kinds of doomsday things.
Right. The millennium bug.
Yeah.
And that, there have been a couple of times where I've tried to explain that to my kids, and they totally don't understand. Like, it's just, they think I'm making it up.
Yeah,
Like, oh, no, like, they were telling us to turn our computers off, and it's like, what? You know, it seems outlandish to them. But there was a lot of worry at the time.
Yeah.
And not to say that it was all unfounded. There were some real issues with codes of various things that we had kind of never thought far enough into the future to realize, you know, we were saving pennies in order to, you know, cost ourselves pounds. But it's amazing how the things that we anticipate sometimes come to pass and sometimes don't.
Like the barricades. I remember that. I had neighbors who built underground shelters.
Yeah, it's like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Sure.
They had us standing in the hall with our heads like this. It's gonna come.
I mean, even as a kid, we were told at least once or twice about ducking and covering and getting under your desk.
We could do that in Texas.
But so when FDR said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, he's making a truism that is actually kind of endemic within human experience, which is the fear of a thing
yeah,
is really typically the worst part of it.
yeah.
We anticipate fears kind of poorly. We over exaggerate them in our minds, and whether that's like a defense mechanism or whatever.
Is that
But
reflecting our lack of faith, our lack of belief?
I think
We're fearful of, we're not believing.
I think that's certainly an aspect of it, and in our you know, our human frailty, our faith is imperfect. But the fear of a thing is almost always worse than the thing
Oh, yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
And that's not just like big ticket items. I mean, that's like little things, like stuff, you know, oh, I'm worried about such and such. And what percentage is it way less bad than you gear yourself up for? You know, it's just one of those things. So, but again, if you can get your patient thinking about these abstract, the future, the judgment of history, the zeitgeist and the cultural milieu. I mean, get them thinking about these really vague, esoteric abstractions, because that's a great way to distract them from simple, concrete truths. Does this work? Does this not work? Is this true? Is this false? Is this righteous? Is this unrighteous? Little things that these are the sort of choices God intends for us. And if we can get that twisted away from us, we will jump straight in to worrying about all the stuff that doesn't really matter. Now, into 26, we're taking a shift here, but it's a useful one. I will say it is a useful one because it's something that I need plenty of ongoing practice in. We have this, we've shifted back to something a little more specific. This couple is ostensibly getting closer and closer. And remember, that's very dangerous, because this being a deeply faithful woman from a deeply faithful family, this is a real problem for the demons. But they're strategizing some ways to set them up for future failure. And the concept of unselfishness. What could possibly be wrong with unselfishness? Any thoughts?
Take pride in your.
I am so humble.
Right.
Right. Yeah, that's always a bad. That's always. Sorry. Unselfishness that becomes lost in its expectation of affirmation, response, appreciation, quid pro quo, whatever.
If you act unselfishly and keep your mouth shut, that's good. if you brag about how unselfish you are, then you're judging somebody else.
Well, you're kind of losing the benefit of your unselfishness because you're calling attention to yourself. It's not very unselfish to say self, self, self. But even beyond the talking and saying something about it, what about the internal perspective and the ways that it is changing us? I am absolutely capable, because this has been tested. This is not a theory. I have tested this hypothesis many times quite successfully. I can be, in my terms, unselfish in something that I do. I never say a word about it, but when it's not reciprocated or appreciated, I get mad. And I don't say anything about it, but I walk around in a huff. Or I become snappy at the other person. What did I do? Nothing. That's the point. I did nothing. Right? You don't even have to say anything in order to feel it churning inside of you. Like, it becomes indignant. Like, I've done so much, and you won't even lift your little finger up. You know, whatever it is, the unselfish act that even if we don't personally overtly call attention to it, are we keeping a score?
There's that expectation.
What is the expectation attached to it, and how is that changing our perspectives? How is it changing our emotional state? How is it changing how we're acting, even if it's kind of indirect or subtle? He makes an observation about the sexes, which I kind of liked. It seemed to have some intuitive sense to me, but we're a mixed group here, so I throw this out to hear your perspectives. He says, and he is speaking in generalities, but women tend to be unselfish in one way, and men tend to be unselfish in a different way. For the woman, unselfish means, let me take your burdens for you. And for the man, it says, let me not give you any burdens of mine. You follow?
Yeah.
So does that make any sense to you? Especially you ladies, because I can't answer as a lady.
Take your burdens. That'd be more control.
No, to help, you feel loved, you want.
Right. I'm kind of thinking like about like mothers and fathers. How, classically we sort of assume like the mother is the protective one and the father's like, yeah, go jump off, see what happens. So whether it's protecting versus adventuring or whatever, but that's sort of a more female perspective of unselfishness is an overt service. Let me do that for you, or let me take that from you so you don't have to. And the more male would be like, I don't want to give you anything else to do. Like, I don't want to burden you with my stuff. Does that seem familiar at all, or?
So what I hear, yes, I hear the mothering part. I also hear, let me show you how to do it.
So yeah, but that's not really the issue just yet. That will be an outcropping of it. So if there's a generalized difference in the sexes, it means this is perhaps related to how we're built differently. We think just differently in a general sense. That won't mean that every single woman only thinks in one way and every single man only. Okay, let's just be cool with each other. That's not what we're saying. The bell curves, right? But here. That doesn't mean there's not a woman who's way more like that than every man we've ever met, and a man and vice versa, blah, blah, blah. It's to say, there's plenty of ways that men or women they just act differently. Is this one of them? And I'm just curious that unselfishness could that be in a more female perspective is the carrying the burdens of others. In my mind, I can justify that because it feels like a very motherly instinct. Mothers and small children, that is sort of an easy response of, I want to take those burdens. I want to care for you to make you better, make things easier for you or whatever. Whereas, I could argue there's a more independent streak that's a little more masculine that says, I got this and I don't want you to have to worry about it. There's an unselfishness to saying, don't worry about it. And there's an unselfishness to saying, let me care for that for you. They're different. Does that seem to be a sex difference? Any thoughts? I'll say I do both. And I'm not arguing for androgyny. I'm just saying that I 100% have this deep-seated temperamental tendency to not ask for help.
That's fair.
Not because I don't want, it's like, oh, I'm too good to be helped. It's not that at all. I feel bad. Like, I don't want to burden you with this. I can handle it. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want you to have to add one more thing to your schedule. I'd rather add it to mine. But that I also will do things, for people. So I'm just curious if you guys have a sense of.
Well, then I'm still trying to figure what's the flip side of the amount.
Hang on to the flip side for a second. We're not to the flip side yet.
Well, I mean, I agree with what you just said. See, I think.
The flip side of both of these, the flip side of both of these will become negative in their own way.
No, I'm not saying the negative part. I'm saying, what is the positive of the woman that's equivalent to, I got this, I don't ask for help. In other words, you said it was, let me take your burden, let me do it for you.
Or let me alleviate your burdens.
Like, I'll do.
Yes,
take
I'll
care
do
of
it.
I'll
I'll
take
do
care
that.
of
How is it different from you saying, I got this?
No, because it's mine.
Oh, okay.
If I have a responsibility,
You're not giving it.
I'm not asking for your help because that would be giving my burdens to you. I will unselfishly do this on my own. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, whether it is or whether it isn't, there are certainly two different ways to have this broader perspective that says this is unselfish of me. So now we can look at the twist. What's the twist negatively to both of those? What's the twist to let me take your burdens for you? What can turn that rotten?
Well, I guess to think that you don't think I'm capable of handling this myself.
Okay, it can be inadvertently insulting,
It is smothers someone.
smothering, controlling, doing it unnecessarily and actually making things more complicated or worse. Now, add in the extra layer of, how could you not appreciate me? You're like, what? Because I didn't ask you to do this. You ever been in that situation? Somebody does you a favor that you didn't ask for, and they get a little frosted that you're not super thankful. Like, okay, but I didn't actually want you to do that. So that's again, Screwtape is suggesting this might be a chink in the armor of this otherwise very pious, very faithful young woman. She will naturally, if she is a Christ follower, want to act in ways that are unselfish. So what you can do is play up her expectations that be graciously received every time, that be recognized, that be reciprocated. The reciprocation is a big one. And let me remind us, we know this, but let me remind us why. The whole movement about men are from Mars and women are from Venus had a really helpful kernel of truth that we express ourselves differently. And a lot of that has to come with different fundamental expectations. And so if you've ever read the 5 love languages, they have a lot of explanatory power to how we act and operate with each other. The idea is, like, let's say I associate care by giving gifts. I really like Morgan, and so I always want to give her a little something, but she never gives me anything. So inside, I kind of feel like there's something missing, like she must not like me, or we've got a distance. Now, Morgan's love language is spending time together. So Morgan's always available for me. She's always there. And when we're ever in a room together, she always makes sure to sit next to me and just kind of be present. She's trying to communicate love, but I'm not hearing it. I'm trying to communicate love and I'm looking for it and I'm not seeing it. And it's because we're speaking in different languages. And when you have two people who are communicating different languages, talking louder doesn't always help. You have to find a way to communicate in a language that the other person understands.
Italian.
So, for instance, once she realizes that my love language is gifts, she may do a little something. It's not natural for her. It's not in her fluent normal language, but because she wants to communicate love, she may give a little gift. And for me, that's wonderful. And then what I might do is, I wasn't really paying attention to the fact she's always sitting next to me, but I'm going to affirm that to her to say, you were trying to love me by doing that. Thank you. And now we're trying to, speak each other's language and we're communicating better. So, men or women or just different people operating in different ways, but taking this unselfishness back to unselfishness, finding an expectation attached to it. And then when that expectation is not met, turning it into some sort of frustration that can grow, that can fester. What a great word, because then it become bitter. It could even become malignant.
The other party didn't even know it.
And the other part, that's the toughest thing. Like with those love languages, the explanatory power of them can be so incredibly helpful in just getting people to communicate better, because you're like, but I gave you 17 gifts. But if that wasn't the person's love language, they're not perceiving the love. That's not your fault for not doing it. We're both missing something because the communication is simply ineffective. It's there, it's just not making sense. So if there is an expectation, this unselfishness needs to be received in a certain manner, but that's not being talked about, the demon is like, oh, good, keep it deep inside of her and tell her this is so obvious and it's so self-evident that if he's not saying anything about it, it must be on purpose. Boy, that's going to really frost her. And then now you're doing some good. And now start whispering to the guy, why is she so upset at me all the time? Why is she such a jerk? Are we drifting apart? All these sort of things.
The same with the mother-son.
Remember, we talked about that very early on, like get them picking at each other and then getting them assuming that the other person is doing it on purpose. And boy, that becomes very, very powerful, because once it's on purpose, it changes something to being, from being frustrating to being an actual offense. Like you're taking a shot at me, and what a jerk you are. Get them to start associating the loving bond they ought to have with each other with those early affections. Because when those start to fade, you're just so hot, or I'm just so smitten, or whatever it is, when that just sort of naturally recedes, if you have them concentrating on that, when it naturally recedes, they're going to start being very worried. Oh no, why is this so hard? It shouldn't be so hard. I'm doing the same thing I used to do and it's not working.
The volume. I'm still thinking if this couple, patient and woman, if they developed with each other and into themselves the basic mere Christianity that is first and foremost to done that, so that the unselfishness doesn't come with, I gave you 17 gifts and you didn't. That will, the way I'm thinking about that, that's not what the purpose of giving is. It's not to expect that.
Sure.
I realize that might be my own selfish, it might be my language, but I don't know, other than I hear so much complication in the way, and yes, the devil, the demons want to complicate. They want to complicate. You said that at the beginning.
This is all very simple, but since when do we ever stick with something?
Right. No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And
It's very
you
simple.
have a lot of, hey, you used to, you don't.
How many arguments would be resolved if two people just said very simple things to each other instead of being upset about what is unsaid that they must know? And if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. Like,
The mind.
but And we can poke at that and say how silly and obvious that is, except I do it all the time.
Well, then, yeah.
All the time. It's so easy. It's so easy. Okay, anything else? All right, 27 and 28 next time. All right.